Hello everyone, welcome back to Douche Gaming. It's me, Bryce, and I said I'd do it. May not be on time, but I did say I would do it. Welcome to my top 10 games of 2020. 2 months late. But hey, I'm here. I did it. I'm finally doing it. Perfect day to do it because it's snowing like hell outside and I'm fucking trapped indoors. So what else am I gonna do? Nothing! So, so here we are. I got my list lined up. I got my thoughts kind of organized. You know how, if you've seen my previous ones, you know how this usually goes. I just kind of chaotically spat out my loves and my dislikes and my overall thoughts on games that I played a lot of over the last year. To make my top 10, the criteria is that it just has to be a game that I played a lot of and I liked it a lot. It didn't necessarily have to come out that year. It could have been a game that's 20 years old, but I played a lot of it and I liked it a lot, and it made my top 10 favorite games of that year, etc., etc. It's a fairly simple process. We're going to start at number 10. Oh, actually, before I start, you notice how I actually put some effort in this time? Typically, there's like no effort at all put into my top 10s. I've got like my nice city skyline city in the background. It looks very good. And I've actually got footage lined up of games this time. So holy shit, there's actually going to be something to stare at. So they don't have to just listen to my dull, drony voice for the next however long I rant. So so without further ado, let's get moving. Number 10 is Far Cry 1, the one that came out, I believe, in 2004. Now, before you say anything, before you're like, what do you mean? It's not a good game, Bryce. Well, hey, let me tell you something. You're right, but there are things about it that make it good. Not good in the way, like, quality good. Good in the way that, like, it makes you laugh and you're just thoroughly entertained by what happens in the game throughout the whole time you're playing it. That's the kind of enjoyment I get from Far Cry 1. Because, let's be honest, it's not, quality-wise, it's not amazing, It's a decent shooter for when it came out. And I think gameplay-wise is probably the best thing it has going for it. And if it wasn't trying to be serious, I would say it was a comedy game. Because the amount of ridiculous shit that happens is kind of unreal. The voice acting is awful. I think that's one of my favorite parts about it, is listening to the various characters like speak, and plus the animations for their mouths are like really janky and like not good looking at all. It kind of reminds me a lot of like the KOTOR mouth animations where everyone looked like blow up sex dolls. How their mouths were all rounded out and they were just like rah, 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 rah. That's what it reminded me of. But it was surprisingly fun for, like, the shooting aspect of it was surprisingly good. Like, I had a lot of fun with just the basic mechanics of it. It wasn't, like, spectacular, but it was fairly solid in terms of the shooting aspect. I thought that it was pretty decent. The roster of guns wasn't, like, spectacular or anything, but they had a decent bit of things to play around with, and I can at least appreciate the effort that went into the actual meat of the game. Along with like the dialogue and the characters speaking and stuff, the story makes it. I mean, I guess on a weird, disjointed level, it kind of makes sense, but it's all over the place and it's kind of insane. It gets really nutty. Like because most Far Cry games are like kind of based in reality. I think the only ones that really aren't is basically like Blood Dragon, That's like sci-fi, and like the rest of them though kind of like follow or like grounded in reality somewhat, like semi-realistic situations. The situations themselves, and the characters maybe not so much, but the places kind of, and like Far Cry 4, Kyrat is a fictional place, but the technology and the places you visit all feel fairly like you could believe that that's a place that exists. Whereas like in Far Cry 1, the location exists, like, sure, and most of it can be like semi-believable up until like about halfway through the game, where they do like a big reveal situation, kind of like they did with the Flood in Halo 1. And they're like, you're not fighting regular dudes with guns anymore. You're fighting like these weird monsters that look like they came out of Resident Evil or some shit. Like that kind of shit. Like this weird creatures that we're not expecting to fight at all, because none of it, as far as I'm aware, in terms of the advertising campaign for that game, that wasn't advertised at all, similar to how the Flood was for Halo 1. So I could appreciate that they went kind of insane about halfway through, because it kept things interesting, kept things moving along, it kept you on your toes. So the unpredictability of the game, combined with the fairly solid shooting, combined with the extremely comedic side of it that's not intentional at all, makes for my number 10. If it wasn't funny, it wouldn't be here on my list at all. But I was laughing so hard throughout my whole experience, combined with like the physics that were surprisingly competent in the game, and just everything else about it was just super. It was a good time, is what I will say. Overall, it's just a good time to be had, if not very chaotic. So yeah, number 10, Far Cry 1. At my number 9, we take a massive leap in quality. At number 9 is L.A. Noire. I remember seeing the trailers and stuff for when that came out. I never had the chance to really play it, or any Rockstar game for that matter. Up until recently, and I was like, you know what? I've been wanting, the idea of sort of stepping into the shoes and immersing myself as a 20s, early 19th century detective. It sounded really fun to me. It's just a great setting. Like, who doesn't like classic, like, detective mystery noir? It's just such a good setting. It's so dramatic and dark, and you can use like the music I'm using now, like jazz, like cafe jazz, of course, noir jazz has a lot more brass. But that being said, it's just a solid choice for telling a story. And I gotta say, I was extremely pleased with L.A. Noire. It's exactly what I wanted, I'm quite happy that, despite not being very immersive, I guess in a way it was. So it felt like an RPG. It felt like an RPG, semi-open world. But there was still a good chunk of structure to it. So you could follow, so you're never gonna not do the main story, because the main story is always present in your face. But it's never like, but you can always do side stuff. You can always explore the world and do side things if you want. But it's never like, it's not full open world, but it's open world enough to just, I don't know, it gives you options. Not a crazy amount, but enough to like have a little bit of variety beyond the main stories. I loved that they sort of separated the game by desks. So you started with like traffic, crime, then you started with, or then you moved on to, was it homicide, I think, and then vice, and then arson. I think I may have missed a desk there, but I liked how they separated like that, because it, I don't know, it just seemed, it felt like a nice progression. You worked your way up in the department as you went along. And I also like the fact that they gave you different partners for each desk. I liked all of them except for the guy in Vice. Every part of the game I liked except for the Vice desk. I don't know how other people feel about the Vice desk in that game, which is like drug trafficking and stuff like that. I didn't like that desk so much. I also just didn't like your partner. He comes across as an asshole the whole game, and just like the Vice desk in general, I wasn't too happy with it. It felt wrong compared to all the other desks he did. I think arson is my second favorite. Homicide desk it's my favorite. There's some really cool stuff that happens with Homicide in that game with the Homicide desk. I think Homicide probably had my favorite sort of partner as well. The I can't remember his name, but he's a bit chunkier guy. He's very drinks a lot. You know, he's got family problems at home. He's like, fucking, I'm a cop and I got family problems, but I'm witty and you like me. Like that kind of character. I liked him a lot. And overall, just that whole section of the game was just solid. Vice was the only thing that took me out of that game. If it wasn't for that, this game would probably be a 10 out of 10 for me. But it's at my number 9. Because there's some games I played this year that I thought were just a lot better. So moving on. L.A. very good, but moving on. Out of the L.A. Noir setting. Sorry, excuse me. At number 8 is Ark Survival. Now, survival games aren't like my biggest thing. I do enjoy them, but I don't like I'll never play them on my own. I will always play them. If I do, it'll be with friends. And before Ark, pretty much the only survival games I had played, I guess, were like Minecraft, unironically. And I guess, Subnautica. I played Subnautica a while ago. That's a very good game. I'd like to play Below Zero, but that's like a finished product. Oh, hey, maybe that's something I can record on the channel. But there's that. And that's, in terms of survival games, that's pretty much about it. And so when my friends were like, "Oh, you want to join us in Ark?" I was like, "Sure, yeah, sounds cool. Dinosaurs technology, dinosaurs with guns, dinosaurs with freaking laser beams. That sounds pretty neat." And yeah, we had a lot of fun in Ark. I gotta say, I've only played it the one time with them, but I think that one time lasted about 100 and something hours. It spread across a couple months in the early part of last year. And it was extremely fun. Just building, like, we started out on the coast. I think we did Ragnarok on the coast of the Ragnarok map. And then we built a small little boat and sailed it down to, like, this sort of Mediterranean sort of looking part of the map. And we set up camp. I started building a castle made of stone that by the time I finished it, we weren't using it for anything. It was just a placeholder. And instead of using that, everyone lived and like put all the important stuff in a shanty town, like not too far away. So I had built like this giant castle for nothing, but it looked very nice. Actually, no, we did use it for something. We used the roof as the landing spot for all our pterodactyls. That's what we used it for. And we got attacked by a T-Rex one time, and it killed like everything we had, and it was very unfortunate. And we also assaulted an in-game like ruined castle that was full of spiders and bats, and we died plenty of times. And we did a bunch of other stuff. We raided like some Egyptian tombs and shit. Fuck, man, it's fun. Games that allow me to just go wild with creativity and build giant structures. Those games are usually like a solid win for me already, like automatically. And Ark does a great job of making things look very nice, I think. I don't know how I feel about Ark 2, the announcement of that, because the trailer they had for it makes me question some things. Like, Vin Diesel, what the fuck are you doing here? And nothing in the trailer that they showed really hints at, you know, any story connection at all. I don't know. Maybe it'll be good. I'm not really sure. Granted, I didn't really play Ark for the story. I played it for the gameplay. But that being said, you know, I'm definitely looking forward to going back to Ark overall. But I don't think that Ark 2 is something I'll be looking forward to. Maybe it will be good. I don't know. But just for now, I'm holding my skepticism. Number 7 is not a game so much. It is a game, but it's a mod of a game that has been around for a long time. So the game itself is Halo Combat Evolved. Halo 1, and in my mind, Halo 1 is one of my favorite first-person shooters just ever. It is extremely solid. There's not much to dislike about that game. In terms of gameplay, it's probably my second favorite Halo, next to Halo 2. So anyway, so Halo 1 is very solid already. Not much you could do, you would think anyway. Like, how could you improve it? Well, a team of people made a very spectacular sort of rework and like overhaul mod essentially for Halo Combat Evolved called SPV3. And wow, oh my god, it takes everything I loved about the game and basically just kind of makes it better. There's a few things I don't like about it, but I think overall it's a very good improvement of the base game, of everything that was already there. Essentially what SPV3 does is it is an expansion upon all the levels pretty much, so whereas Halo 1 had a lot of very lengthy levels, now they're even longer, if you liked that sort of thing. It adds a lot of open segments, it adds a lot of new enemy types, kind of, that weren't in the original game, like hunters. Am I retarded? Hunters were in the first... I'm sorry. Fuck me. The Jackal's cousins from Halo Reach. What are they called again? I can't remember. But if you played Halo Reach, you know what I'm talking about. Those guys are here. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So, yeah, that's why I thought of hunters. So, obviously, they were already in the game. But, so other than expanding, like, the roster of some enemies, it adds more drivable vehicles, I believe. It adds more weapons that weren't in the game originally. And why I thought of the hunters is because you can pick up the hunter's fucking plasma launcher now in the mod, and it's pretty fantastic. Because, if you remember Halo 1, Hunter's plasma launchers worked differently than they did in the other games. In the other games, it's like a solid beam. In the first game, though, it just like launches a bomb, essentially. And the fact that you get to use that, it's pretty fun. But it adds a bunch of new weapons, like weapons that were in Halo Reach, like the DMR. The battle rifle, I believe, is in it. It adds some weapons that were never in any of the games, like I believe an altered version of the Needler is in it. I can't remember what that does exactly. I believe the Brute Shot was added. There's some things I can't remember off the top of my head. It's been a few months, but it solidly does some really cool stuff, and not to mention the expansions that are in the levels. That makes the levels longer. They add some really good-looking world spaces. The graphics in general have been kind of like upgraded to a sort of in-between of Halo 1 and Halo 2, I would say. And then my brain just died all of a sudden. Oh yeah. They also decided to use sort of like cut voiceover work, and cut sort of content from the game and make their own sort of like custom campaign where you don't play as Master Chief. I think you play as like either a Marine or an ODST that was on the Pillar of Autumn. And those were okay. They weren't amazing. I certainly don't think that was probably my least favorite part of the mod itself, was the missions they added. Not that there's anything against what they did, but some of the voice acting, because they did custom voice acting along with the cut voice lines from the base game, and you can tell there's a difference in the quality, and it's a bit jarring. But even with that being said, it's a spectacular mod. If nothing else, play it for just the overhaul and rework of the base game's campaign, because it is spectacular. Alright, number 6. Finally getting some, city builders on this list. I think City Skylines, as you can see, I think was on the list a couple years ago when I first played it. But now we got another one, and at number 6 is Frostpunk, which is very fitting, considering that it's snowing like a bitch outside. Frostpunk, wow. This is a very good example of having a city builder that gives you a lot of freedom to build how you want, but also keeps you focused on a very important task at hand, and that is keeping people alive from a Ice Age situation. It's very intriguing to be in that situation. You're a leader in that game of sorry, my voice is kind of dying. A leader of survivors who left London after this sort of giant sort of end of the world event happened, where the world has entered another ice age, and it's a very steampunk kind of setting. There's like some technology that obviously didn't exist in that period that's in that game, like these giant automatons that are meant for like working and stuff. And basically, you're trying to lead a group of survivors in what is referred to as the last city to survive through these various snowstorms that drop temperatures like an extreme amount that people, as you know, you can imagine, would not normally survive on. You also have to, but in the game, you have to not just survive, but to also thrive. You have to provide, you know, amenities for people for them to be happy. You have to give them hope, and prevent discontent from rising, unless if you wish to, you know, unfortunately get toppled by a rebellion or have people abandon the city. It's a very difficult game of balancing the various resources you need and the various sort of feelings that people have at the time. Hope and discontent are the big two. And there's like a sort of a very cool system where you enact laws, and the laws provide different positive effects to your society and negative effects. They usually have, most laws will have like a little bit of both. And eventually, there's basically like 3 paths you can go in the game, and I thought this was really neat. And depending on how you go, it'll kind of affect your city's aesthetic, the sort of way your people, sort of your society is sort of founded upon, what its foundations are. And so there's 3 kind of directions. The first direction is that you can be a very sort of middle of the road kind of city where, you know, you're not super extremist in one way or the other. You're just very communal. Everyone's looking out for each other, and it's very basic, but it's effective. That's basically the best way you could go without going down a very totalitarian path. The other 2 paths, oh boy, you could either become a sort of a fascist dictatorship, where you have public executions and by steaming them to death, turning them into steamed lobsters. But by doing that, what happens is that you no longer have to worry about hope. It's just discontent you have to worry about at that point. So yeah, very fucked up. And that's the direction I went when I played the game. But I survived. I beat the game that way, so I sacrificed my humanity for victory. It always works. Yeah, well, anyway. The other direction, as far as I'm aware, I haven't played it myself, is that you can become a kind of religious communism, which sounds interesting. But either way, the game is a fantastic city builder, and I guess somewhat of a survival game as well. If you're into city builders and that have survival elements to them, I think it would be a good choice. Very solid, very fun, very stressful. And not to mention, there's expansions to the game that add new scenarios for you to try out in like different sort of settings. So instead of like the freezing Ice Age, there's one that takes place beforehand where it's in a sort of very hot summer time where you have to worry about heat instead of cold. I haven't tried that out yet, but it looks interesting. There's also sort of scenarios that have to deal with the amount of land and room you have to expand. Like I know there's one on the cliff. It seems very interesting. And so on and so forth. So it's number 6, Frostpunk. Very fun. Number 5 is a game that goes back to sort of comedic aspects of things, but this time, this is not a game that is comedic because of its non-existent quality. It is comedic because it is intentional, and this game does have some quality. I love this game a lot. Number 5 is Void Bastards. So this game is, I guess you could call it a combination of FTL and, what else? It's a first-person shooter FTL, so rather than having your own ship, which, I mean, you do have your own ship, but you don't really control anything on that. What you're controlling is where the ship goes, and that's really the FTL part of it. And then the first-person part of it comes into play when you go to different ships, and you go onto these ships to salvage materials and technology, blueprints, ammo, supplies of any kind, you know, just in general. And your goal overall, if I remember correctly, is to escape the place that you've arrived in, which is like a group of systems or whatnot. Basically, the game is you playing as these prisoners. Every time you die, you get a new prisoner to control, and you are sent out to scavenge for resources and stuff. And as you go on, you collect blueprints to upgrade your weapons, get better weapons that are more fun to play with. But as you upgrade yourself, different enemies start coming out into the open that are more difficult to deal with. You have to strategize around them. Sometimes it's better to run and hide than to fight enemies directly. The game is very fun in the respect that every time that you go onto a new ship, it is kind of a different situation, because it's sort of, I don't know if it's randomly generated, it's more like procedurally generated. So you got new layouts to explore, new enemies to fight, and it always kind of keeps you on your toes. You're always trying to find new ways to deal with situations that arise, whether it be straight up confrontation, or whether it be you having to strategize in a situation and try to find ways to get out of an area where you're trapped in, or run away from an enemy that's persistent and trying to find you, but you can't really fight. Or sometimes there are modifiers on the ships you go on where, like, the oxygen's out and you have to find and repair the systems to make sure you can breathe again before you die. Maybe the light systems are gone, so it's completely fucking dark and it's scary. Some very interesting situations to get into. But even despite some of the scary tone of the game that it sometimes has, of just exploring the unknown, the game is very comedic. It has a very comedic design to its story and its dialogue, and even to the enemies you fight. A lot of the enemies have dialogue that is very, very humorous, and I can say that this game has affected my humor somewhat, because it is now very common for me to scream out the various dialogue things that some of the enemies say. For example, there are these enemies called passengers. I think they're some of the most common. Where there are these people who have been reduced to green goo with like a top hat and a suitcase. And if you get close to them, they explode. And as they do so, they typically scream out things like, "My luggage!" or "My husband!" or various things like that. You know, it's very... and it makes me laugh. It's a very funny game, and there's other enemies that do similar things to that effect. And not to mention, you have this kind of HAL 9000 character who's sort of pushing you along through your objectives and kind of mocking you and doing the typical kind of, human-hating robot, but, I have to do what I'm told, but, I'm going to mock you at the same time kind of situation. Overall, it's a very, very solid game. The shooting is not bad either. From looking at the visual style of the game, making it kind of look like comic bookish, it may not look like the shooting would be that good, but it is fairly decent, fairly solid. Overall, I definitely think this game is worth playing if you have the option. Maybe on sale. I don't know what full price is, but definitely worth it. Definitely worth the price, I'm sure, whatever they're putting it at. At number 4, I kind of felt a bit controversial about putting this at number 4 because I have not beaten this game, and I'm currently recording it for the channel. That's Outer Wilds. Typically, I don't put games on my top 10 unless I finish them, and Outer Wilds I haven't finished yet, so it's kind of weird to me. But the thing is like, it's very good. I know it's very good, and while it does feel wrong to put it preemptively on the list, I can't help I don't know, it feels like it still should go on there. I feel like I should give it the recognition it deserves, because I played, the majority that I've played has been in the previous year, and it doesn't feel like, I should put it in next year's list, to wait that long. So I figure I should just put it in the list now, get it out of the way, that this game is a very, very good, very well designed, almost artsy, a little bit exploration game. Whereas walking simulator games wish they could be this kind of thing, sort of deal. It also shows that this is one of those games where you don't need like a combat system or any kind of fighting involved to be a good game, to just be really solid. This is one of those games that the moment it drops you into it, you are immediately intrigued by what the hell is going on. It's very Space Groundhog Day kind of situation where, time is repeating itself and it's a giant mystery. And the more that unravels, the bigger the situation becomes that you come to realize, and the more you want to know as to why the hell it's happening and can I put a stop to it. And the more you discover about what's happening, the more frustratingly obsessive you feel like you need to find out what the hell is happening. At least that's how I've been feeling throughout my whole experience of it. And being that it's space, it's not space without being scary, and perspective in this game makes everything look kinda fucky-wucky with my eyes. Because the planets aren't super large. You have this nice contained, handcrafted system of planets to explore. But none of the planets are, like a 1-to-1 scale. They're all built just the right size to that. It takes a good time to explore. But, it doesn't take so much time that, you get bored of these worlds. Each world has a bunch of stuff to explore, but it's all enough and contained to be just the right amount of time to keep your interest. And each planet has their own unique features about them. One has a black hole at its center and is constantly like crumbling. One is just a giant water planet with a bunch of hurricanes and tornadoes happening on it, where it throws its own islands up into the atmosphere and come crashing back down. You got your basic forest planet. It's where you start. It's a very relatively safe place. You got the Quantum Moon, which that place is scary. That place is weird. And then you got the Ember Twins, the two planets that sort of orbit each other and sort of transfer sand, or I guess ash between the two. They've all got their own gimmicks that keep it very interesting and unique. So while I haven't finished Outer Wilds yet, I'm still putting it here at number 4 because I think it deserves it. And I just feel like I have to put it on the list before another year goes by. So yeah, at number 3, we're coming back to first-person shooters. Lots of first-person shooters on here this year. Number 3 is, I believe it was 2014's or 2012's. I can't remember. Shadow Warrior, the sort of reboot to the Shadow Warrior series. Man, this is another game that has comedy to it that is intentional, and it makes me laugh a fair bit. It's more on the dumb side of comedy, I will say, being that the main character is literally called Wang. You got Wang, that's fucking, it's dumb, but it's like 90s humor dumb. It's like good, it's acceptable, it's funny. And this game, I think, is a prime example of something I may have talked about in the past on what makes some of my favorite games what they are. What I like to call sort of reactive. I don't know if that's the proper term for it. Where a game has combat, and when you do something, the game responds in a way you expect it to realistically happen, or at least like it feels like it should happen. So, like, for example, Dishonored is an example of this, a prime example of this. When you take your gun and you shoot a guy with it, he gets shot, blood comes out, and he like does this physics-based sort of, he gets knocked back essentially. He gets like knocked off his feet, and he like does the full arms out, legs out, that's thrown back. It feels reactive, like feels like what that should happen when a musket ball out of a pistol hits a guy at point blank. Or like in Dishonored, when you take your sword and you swipe a guy, his head comes off, Or like another example of reactive is like, if you were to take a sledgehammer to a guy's head in like a zombie game, like GTFO, for example, you take a sledgehammer to one of the enemies and their head explodes. Like that feels like that's what should happen. Not like like an RPG that uses health bars, where when you hit them they don't really react in any way. There's no animation. There's no real feel of impact to what you're doing. It feels very flat and not very good to do. A lot of games like MMOs feel that way. They don't have impact a lot of time, and they feel very bland in terms of combat and gameplay as a result. Shadow Warrior did it right. Shadow Warrior is all about taking a katana and a big roster of guns and just chopping shit up. Demons and gangsters or mobsters just alike, and everything feels good to do. You take your katana to dudes and demons, and when you hit them with your katana, you're like, man, I expect these guys to get chopped into bits. They get chopped into fucking bits. And it feels fantastic. Same thing with your guns. All your guns feel pretty damn good. I would say, like, maybe some of the SMGs don't feel all that great compared to, like, the shotgun and the rocket launcher. But it's got your typical roster of, like, sort of, you know, typical FPS guns, like the rocket launcher, shotgun, SMG, assault rifle type thing. But the main reason, like, Shadow Warrior is so good is that katana. Man, melee in that game plus the shotgun, I feel is the best two parts about the combat of Shadow Warrior. But it's heavily reactive, and that works in a game that's all combat, that focuses all on combat. It's very fast paced, and you're chopping things up all the time. So to have it feel that satisfying and good is important to keep you, feeling quite satisfied with what you're doing. And Shadow Warrior pulls it off great. Unlike its sequel, Shadow Warrior 2, that game is a disappointment because it is not that at all, and it's unfortunate. But Shadow Warrior, very good, and I hope that Shadow Warrior 3, which I don't know when that's coming out, but it has been advertised and revealed, that I hope they go back to roots with that, because Shadow Warrior has been my favorite shooter of this year, hands down, no question. At least of that style, because the next game we're talking about, at number 2, is also a shooter in a sense. It's more of a hardcore team-based shooter, and that, at number 2, is GTFO. GTFO came out, I believe it was this year, or at least earlier this year. They had the beta last year, and I believe it officially got released into 1.0 this year. And holy shit, it's a very engaging game. If you want a game that has dark sci-fi elements, but is also like horror, survival, and very hardcore team-based shooter tactics, like this is that kind of game. The atmosphere is dark, it's brooding, it's scary, but also like a hard and sort of like a oppressive industrial environment. A lot of times they have been adding new environments like labs and places like that, which is very neat. It's nice to see them adding stuff that keeps it fresh visually. But the enemies they're always mixing it up with the enemies they're adding. Like it's one of those games where you really need to be on your toes at all times with where you're walking, what you're looking at, whether or not you have your flashlight turned on at something. It's very fun. A lot of the game does revolve around you being quiet rather than shooting all the time, because your ammo is limited. And in that game, you're not like a soldier, you're not professionally trained, you are a prisoner. You don't have great, armor protecting you. You are and feel very vulnerable in GTFO, because you are. Even with a team of 4, you feel naked, and everything is dangerous and out to kill you. And it's just a very intense game, but it feels very satisfying once you've overcome a mission in that game, and that's kind of what keeps you coming back to it. You want to see what new things they add to the game, what new enemies, new objectives, new weapons to sort of deal with your various challenges with. And everything about that I like, and I like horror sci-fi. There's not many examples of horror sci-fi that get it right. This game is one of those examples that gets it right. GTFO is fantastic, and I do plan on playing more with my friends in the future. Maybe we'll record some, I don't know. That's at number 2. And finally, here we are, coming at number 1. Now, I think this game came out in 2019, and being that I'm a huge fan of FromSoft's work and Miyazaki and what he's done for the gaming industry, I'm very I'm very happy with how this game turned out, and that it got the fucking game of the year for, I believe it was 2019, and that is Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Um, yeah, I think something that, so I gotta say that I've already been a fan of Dark Souls and, well, I guess Dark Souls for a long time. I have to say that I've never played Bloodborne or uh, um, Demon Souls. I probably would have if they weren't exclusives, but they are. And exclusives are cancer on the society of people who play games, because it, prevents people from experiencing certain games. It keeps people away. In my mind, it's a very bad business model of having exclusive games, especially since now I only play PC. I don't have consoles anymore. So I mean, like, so as a result, I've only had the ability to really play the Dark Souls trilogy, and I got really into those, I think 2016. I played Dark Souls 2 for the first time. And on this channel, me and Todd have done co-op runs of all three games, Patrick included, for Dark Souls 3. Those were very fun. And Sekiro, I really am pleased with with the direction they took it. I'm not usually into, like, the Japanese shogunate, like, time period, like those kinds of settings for games. Like, I'm not huge into it, but I think it's okay. I think it's neat. But this game does it very well. I think this game paints the sort of mythology of that era of Japan in a very neat and interesting light. One that I find intriguing. But once again, I think that's just kind of a trend with Miyazaki. His visual, the way he envisions certain things of fiction and settings, sort of always kind of tends to captivate me. And Sekiro is no different. And unlike Dark Souls, where Dark Souls is, and people have said this 1,000 times, I don't really have to talk about Sekiro too much. Most people know the differences between Dark Souls and Sekiro. But whereas Dark Souls is a game of patience, Sekiro takes it to a whole new level, and like Bloodborne, is very aggressive and very, very rhythmic. And that's a very satisfying thing, to see swords clash, and in a way that is like almost cinematic. Dark Souls doesn't quite do it that way, It's just kind of sort of like the only thing that clashes in Dark Souls is like sword to shield, not so much sword to sword. Whereas Sekiro, it feels very much like a proper duel between warriors in most situations. Not to mention, Sekiro has some of the most engaging boss fights of the Miyazaki games I've played, or of the FromSoft games I've played in a fair while. Demon of Hatred. Fuck, that is one of my favorite experiences, including what's his face, the final boss of Sekiro. I can't remember his name all of a sudden. But if you know the game, you probably know what I'm talking about. Sekiro is a fantastic game. God, it's fun. I know that's what most of this video has been. Is like, this game's fantastic. This game's fantastic. But I mean, it's a top 10 for a reason. I've got some negatives about some of these games, but overall, like, I don't have much bad to say about most of these. I think the only thing that I was a little bit saddened by Sekiro, and it's not even really, this is just more of a nitpick, I don't really care that much even, is that you're stuck with the same weapon the whole time. Because whereas Dark Souls has a lot of variety in the armor choices and the weapon choices you have, Sekiro is very much more focused on not so much your build, but it's more focused on on the one weapon you have and the craft of just fighting with that one weapon by having a whole tree of perks that provide a bunch of unique and cool moves and animations to use in combat, and other passive abilities that you can have. And to be honest, I'm okay with that. I like that, FromSoft and Miyazaki are experimenting more with what they, they're deviating more from the base formula that they've had, and they're trying out new things. And Sekiro is one of those things where they experimented and it worked very well. We wouldn't have gotten Game of the Year otherwise if they didn't do it so well. It was a fantastic example of trying something new, and it worked out fantastically. So yeah, Sekiro at number 1 for my top 10 of 2020. That's been my top 10 for this year. Man, I'm looking forward to what's coming around this year, 2021. I have to say, I won't lie to you, I've played a few games already in these past couple months that are probably going on the list already. Like I've played a few games. I won't say what they are, because I don't want to spoil. But I've played a few games already this year that I already know are going on the list. I'm pretty sure I found my number 1 already. Like, that's pretty nutty for me. Because it was like the first new game I played this year in January, and I was like, how the hell can I find something that tops this? Like, I started off this year with a game that set the bar pretty damn high. So we'll see what happens. I've got my update video that I made just a little while ago. That'll talk about some of the games I thought about that maybe playing this year. So yeah, I hope you join me just rambling, like nonsensically, about games I like. And hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll stick around and see what we do this year. I'm looking forward to it. And hopefully this goddamn snow goes away so I can leave my house. So anyway, I've been Bryce, Douche Gaming, with my top 10 of 2020. And, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.